Gordon.
We're interviewing Mr. Wendell Miller Jr. The interviewer is Michael Akey. It is January 2nd, 2001 at Latham headquarters. Mr. Miller, prior to the war, what were you doing?
I was a laboratory assistant and a chemical man in the General Aniline and Film operation from 1935 to 42, and then I went into service. But I was in the aniline as a laboratory boy, a junior tech, and I went out in the building to become a chemical operator to learn about gases and the manufacture of material.
And as the war came, where were you on December 7th? When,
Going into a movie in Albany when we heard it. Turned around, went right back home. That was it. And 2 days later tried to enlist, and they said no because of the fact that I was already in the process of being inducted in the Army, paperwork and everything else going through. So I had to wait until April the 10th, the day after Easter, 1942, went into service in the Army in Albany. Went from there to Camp Upton. Camp Upton went to Fort D.A. Russell on May the 13th. And May the 13th I was indoctrinated as far as a chemical operator for a mortar. They didn't even have mortars when I first went into the chemical unit. They had pamphlets. I read up in the pamphlet and knew what was going on, how it was operated and everything else. And we went through our basic training down here. We built our own obstacle course. We were a group that was bastard outfit, away from everybody else. We had in Fort D.A. Russell in Marfa, Texas, they had a small group of cavalry outfit that did patrolling on the Mexican border. They had 13 MPs in the outfit, and we ended up by being our own MPs, doing whatever we had to do. We had to do it ourselves, and we learned. And then we got a group in from the south, the rebels. About the best way I explained it. They were rebels. We had to teach them and make sure that they were going to be good mortar men the same as we were. We were not the cadre when we first went to. We were the second group. The cadre was already in Fort D.A. and then we were the second group. We learned it hard in 8 weeks of basic training. And then when the rebels came in, we had to teach the rebels to be actually soldiers and good-sized mortar men.
so how'd you get along with your southern...
Well, we'll put it this way. There was many an argument and many a scuffle around the rebels and the Yankees, damn Yankees.
And when it came down to business?
They were there. The best guy I ever had as a Jeep driver was Farley May, and he was from Mississippi. And he was one of the best. Matter of fact, he was a dirt driver of these stock cars down there. And he was my driver. And boy, he put a Jeep in places where nobody else could. Had 3 Jeeps blown out from underneath us while rolling Germany.
So you trained for how long?
Trained, from, let's say from May until 42, until about April of 43. And we went on to Louisiana maneuvers. And we did that for about 3 weeks. Found out that we were not supposed to be in the maneuvers because we were not being trained to go into the South Pacific through jungle. And we went to Fort Gordon in Florida. We learned house-to-house fighting and so on like that. Down by Apalachicola. And from there we went to Camp Pickett. Got everything all straightened up and out and around, new equipment, new stuff. Went to Fort Miles Standish in Massachusetts.
Now, what unit were you at that point?
81st Chemical Mortar, Company D, 1st Platoon, 1st Squad.
You weren't attached at this point?
No, we were freelancing.
So your next stop was?
In Miles Standish in Massachusetts, outside of Boston.
Mhm.
And we separated from the rest of the battalion, went to New York City, got on the Queen Lizzie and went over to England. Went over to England, we were the first group to go over there to straighten out and see how things were going to be. And we were the trainees. And then we became the trainers. We were for the 1st Division, the 29th Division, and there was another division that came in there after. We were not attached to them. But when we went into Normandy Beach, we were attached not only to the 1st Division, but the 29th Division, as close in support. First wave in Normandy Beach and on Dog Red, there was not very many men standing upright. 21 feet of beach was what we had until 3:30 in the afternoon. Fired my mortar, busted off a outfit that was firing down on us, knocking our captain was lost, he was killed. Our colonel, he was shot, he went back. Had 2 officers that were lost right then and there. Our platoon sergeant, he got back on the boat on the LCVP and went back to England. He didn't want no part of it. He chickened out. So I was the head honcho at the time. We knocked out the pillbox, busted a hole into the wall, then we went on inland.
Your training for the landing was
Done in
adequate?
England. Done in England.
Done in England.
Very good. We fired our mortars from LCVPs. We fired them from ducks. We fired them from the back of 6x6. We built up a stanchion, put sand into it, put our mortars into it, fired it from there. Not only from there, we did it on the LCVP. On the ducks, we busted out the bottom part of the duct. Our mortar went down into the gully. So we had they didn't want us in the ducts anymore. And it was too high to take the duct and the mortar out of the duct and put it back down on the ground, where LCVP would stop into the water, and then you're moving on.
Now, explain what actually is a chemical mortar.
It's 4.2 chemical mortar is a mortar.
Designed to do what?
What's it supposed to do? Supposed to knock the living daylights out. We fired HE and we also fired white phosphorus. We had also in a ship back in the bay before we came in, we had actually poison gas. There was 3 people that were supposed to tell whether we were going to use it or not. I was the commander of the 1st Division, our colonel, and our captain. Second guy, or the 4th guy, me, because I had first number 1 mortar. I was the call for it in case we needed it. Didn't call for it. It stayed out in the bay. And that first night, we had the Junkers 88s coming over. Just a couple of them. We could lay on the ground and look up, and we could see the pilot and the flashing lights on his dashboard. And the order went out throughout the area, don't fire, let the Navy take care of them. The Navy started to, and we were getting more shells in from the Navy than we were from the German. Now.
So you were on the beach for how long?
Well, supposed to have been in there at 7:30. We're in there at 5 minutes after 7. The same lineup as the first wave went in. And we were there until 3:30 in the afternoon. 21 feet of beach. That's all we had. And the order was given, knock that pillbox out, going through the hole. We knocked it out, we went through the hole. The first village was Vierville-sur-Mer that we hit. We stayed there at night, hunkered down, Next morning, we moved on through to the hedgerows.
Well, you reached the Bocage, the 29th Division. This was, had you heard about the Bocage prior to?
No, no, we did not know about it, but we suffered a lot of losses there. We could be on one end of it, look over the hill, up, and there the Germans were. They were hunkered down the same as we were.
So it took the 29th Division a while to figure out how to deal with this because you hadn't really trained for it.
Right.
And how, do you remember how they learned to deal with the Bocage?
Yeah, down one alley and down and hunker down, down another alley and hunker down. And there were alleys, I'd say, just about wide enough that you get two people abreast. They tried to put tanks down through there. They couldn't. They ended up by putting things on the front of the tanks in order to go through the hedgerows and knock them the hell out of the way.
What became the job of the mortar company during this process?
Fire over the, try to stop the Germans. The Germans were already set in position back there. They knew exactly what each area was on their map. And they knew it would be 1, 2, 3, or 4, and they would have their guns already set in. And we had to figure out where their guns were and knock them out. And see, a lot of them didn't figure. They were figuring on a flat trajectory. They didn't figure on the mortars going up and coming down. And when they would come up and they come down, they were wrecking havoc onto it. We were knocking out unit after unit. We knocked out a big barn that they had a 88 stashed in there, and this lieutenant and his radio man got out of the one hedgerow and started to the barn, and they were blasted apart. That was the last shell ever came out of that barn. We blasted it apart. Lieutenant Moorfield and Tommy Ward was killed instantly, right then and there. And the British, oh, they were a lovely bunch of coconuts, I'm telling you. They were the ones that were always, they would stop at 4 o'clock every afternoon. They had tea and biscuits. They hit the easiest part of Normandy Beach. And my son said to me, Dad, they've been in the war for 6 years. I said, yes, but we had to go over there and save them. And they always gave us the answer of one thing. We were too many of us, too sexy, too much money. That's what we were. We were two.
What did, do you have any impressions of the German as a soldier?
They were good. They were, but what actually knocked the Germans out, as far as we were concerned, was our manpower and our mortar power, because of the fact that we were going in, getting in one at a time, a group or anything else. We had a shell came in from one of their heavy guns on the railroad just outside of St. Lo, and they fired, and one shell went and landed in a hodgepodge group on the side and landed in there, never exploded. And that shell was bigger around than you are. Never exploded. If it had exploded, we wouldn't have been here. And so, this one kid, he stood there and he got covered with mud and everything else. They took him back to England, a raving maniac.
How would you compare the German equipment with your equipment?
The 88s were superb, so was their tanks. But as far as their guns were concerned, they were not as fast as we were. They didn't fire as fast. They had their little burp guns. But we had our Tommy rods and also our M1s and those carbines. But their potato smashers, their hand grenades, were much better than ours. We had to have them in as a baseball. They had a handle to a potato masher. You could throw them better than you could throw a regular hand grenade. And that's debatable to a lot of people.
The 29th Division, how long did it take you to get out of the Bocage? Approximately.
Probably a month till we actually hit St. Lo. And then the 1st Division and then the 29th overlapped. And the British was off to the side, stopping for their tea every now and then. And they were supposed to be in Caen that night of D-Day. They were not there.
So what's your general opinion of the British soldier?
Not much. Not much as far as I'm concerned. They were good soldiers, but there was too much of this Montgomeryism about it, that you had to stop. That's all there was to it. I didn't care what you were doing. You were dropping your pants to take a... You had to stop down in there for tea and biscuits. That was them. They came in our outfit, down in, and come across into our outfit, and they were picking up chickens, they were picking up rabbits and everything else, going back. They were having their... We were on C rations and K rations and so on like that. And that's what they were doing.
So you're primarily a support battalion?
Yes. Yep. Close in support. At times there was nobody in front of us. That's how close we were. Close to the German, not to us.
And after the Bocage, what was your next?
Falaise Gap. Went into St. Lo. After St. Lo was in, then we took off from there, went into the Falaise Gap.
What was that like?
Murder for the Germans. It was plain, unadulterated murder. We caught them in a pocket. I say my platoon sealed the end and escape route that the Germans were using. There was cattle, there was good Germans laying all over the place. Their shells, their tanks, everything. We sealed it, that they could not get out because they didn't know when the next shell was going to drop in on that area. So we stopped, and they lost, the Germans lost in the Falaise Gap.
Now, your unit depended generally on forward observers to call in.
Yep.
What was that like?
Terrible. Sometimes we were out in front and nobody was in front of us whatsoever. We had to do the falling back on a crossroad at a church. One of the first things we learned over there is to knock the steeple out of all the French churches. Because the Germans were up there, observation posts. Knock them out and you got them handicapped. And then we could pick out the places where their guns were loaded.
So you acted as a forward observer at times?
Yes, I did for about a month. And then I went back to the mortar outfit in order to make sure they were firing it right. Sometimes they would fire and it would be behind us instead of in front of us. And that was not good. But we could tell, as I said, it took 29 seconds from the time that mortar shell was dropped down the barrel till it went up in the air and down. Well, here's a good thing we did when we were in England, going and learning to go into the beach and everything else. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the shells were fired on the beach, smoke, or on the beach. Then the RAF come over to strafe the beach, which they did. One RAF pilot was a little bit slow in coming over, and at 8:05, exactly, you fired the first HE. Well, he was a little bit behind time. He said he saw the shell come up in front of his airplane and took its tail off. He went into the English Channel, ceased firing everything else, knocked the mortars down, take them back, clean them up. Got back there, and this one friend of mine, he decided to paint on the side of my mortar a Spitfire. It's for fun. The officers came in, English officers came in also, looked, and they wanted to know what outfit I was firing for and fighting for, the Germans or the Americans. I said, well, he just happened to be in our way, we knocked him out of our way. And then we got outside of Metz, and I knocked down an observation plane who was observing our fire onto Fort Met, Fort Beyond, outside of Metz. And he got in the way and we knocked him down. And he came back to see. And this artist friend of mine said, I'll paint also an American plane. He got 2 for 1. We had a little fun. I have a picture in here, and I'll show you. We got back, when the war was over, this corporal and I went back to Paris on the Bastille Day celebration. We had the bottle and we opened it up and we celebrated.
After the Falaise Gap, what was the next?
Paris. I love Paris in the springtime. It's beautiful. And there. This is on Normandy Beach, right there. That way. Here's a picture in Paris of our outfit. That's me with the pipe in my mouth.
A handsome fellow.
Yeah. Here is a picture of what a chemical mortar looks like right here.
And you were in Paris for how long?
Not too long.
Not too long. Still with the
When-
29th Division.
When the MP started to chase it, that's when we had to get out of Paris. I was trying to find out where it said, can't pick it, sea voyage. We were at Ilfracombe in North Devon, going back to England. And that was, we would look out onto the Bay of Wales, onto see Wales.
After your brief stay in Paris,
And we went down, we went through to Metz, and then while we're at Metz, and the winter set in, and we had to go to the Battle of the Bulge. Had to go up there and help them, and that's the reason why we got 5 battle stars, presidential citation, good behavior, and that was debatable. And
so you're part of the 3rd Army at that point?
and we got a transfer from there to the 3rd Army. Now don't ask me what outfits we were with. We were with so damn many, it was like changing our underwear. They're changing from here to there and so on from this outfit. We were even involved with a tank destroyer outfit to be with them. If they would go in, they would do something, we would have to take and lay down a smoke screen for them or fire HE in order to protect their flanks.
How did you like being with the 3rd Army?
Good, up until the time when Patton told me, get the hell out of his sight.
Well, would you explain how that occurred?
Yes, there was 8 of us from our outfit that were up before him in order to have the lieutenant bars pinned onto us. And I happened to be the first one to be in line, and he stood there giving out a big explanation about this and that and everything else. And I stood in front of him, and he looked at me and he said, "You were about to become an officer and a gentleman of the United States Army by an act of Congress." I said, "Sir," I saluted him. I said, "I was a gentleman before I got in this army, and I'll be a gentleman after I'm out of this army." And he turned and he roared, "Get this man out of my sight!" Well, when I got back, our lieutenant colonel was there, and he said, "I ought to kick your ass." He said, "I have the bar." He said, "The Colonel James earned while he was at West Point. There was a silver bar, and you were to get the silver one, not the gold ones, not the second lieutenant. You're to be the first lieutenant. Now," he says, "you get those stripes sewn back on." So I had to go and sew them back on. Now that was my real episode with General Patton. But my radio man and telephone man was putting wires up in the tree in order to keep the vehicle. Well, he come along and without showing who he was and everything else, and this Frank Spanner was the corporal, and he was trying to flip the wires up. So this guy turned and said, "Can't you get it up there?" Frank Spanner turned the same as I did. "If you think you're doing any better than I am, goddamn, get out of that Jeep and do it." He got out of the Jeep. He spun the thing up there, and he turned it back. And he said, "Now," he wanted to see the officer in charge. He said, "We don't have an officer in charge. We only have a sergeant in charge." Then he found out it was me. And then Jeep, and away he went. Never said another word to me.
The Third Army was a little more spit and polish than most.
Yeah.
What did you think of that?
Even wanted us to salute at times. And we said no, for a simple reason. If you were up in a tree somewhere or up in a tower and you saw me salute you, you're the guy that's going to get knocked off, not me. You're the guy. We said we didn't want it. And they complained because of the fact that we were not, we were dirty. Well, when you come in from the beach all the way to that far and you haven't had a chance to take and even get sometimes clean underwear on, you did smell. Everybody smelled alike. And he going around all spit and polish and everything, that's fine and dandy. He could go back and take a shower every afternoon he wanted to. We couldn't.
What was the Ardennes like?
Terrible. Terrible. Well, we saved them from the Battle of the Bulge. We went in through the Ardennes. We found the soldiers. Wired hands behind them and shot. That's when the order was given. Take no prisoners. We didn't from that time on. We slaughtered them as fast as they could come in our sights. And then we went across the Rhine River. First we went on up through into, broke away from the Third Army, and up at the First Army again, and went on up through Aachen to Cologne, the plain to Cologne. And then they pulled us out of there, and we went on down through, on the Autobahn. We got all the way as far inland in Czechoslovakia, Belsen. We traveled a lot in Germany, and we got called back again, got attached to the Third Army, went over the Rhine River, down below, beyond Ramagen Bridgehead, went in through there, and down in through to Munich. Before we hit Munich, we hit Belsen, which was the concentration camp. I got pictures of that too. Well, a great one for taking pictures. And we saw the conditions that they were into. And we went through and down to Birch's Garden. From Birch's Garden we went on in through to as far as Turnberg, which is just outside of Vienna, Austria, when the war ended.
What were your thoughts at that point?
We're going to go home. But then they come out with the point system. Had to have 85 points in order to get out and go home. I had 83. That close. We went back to a Camp Lucky Strike. Got cleaned up, issued new mortar, new equipment and everything else, and take away the guns that we had that we procured along the line. We had 50 caliber machine guns, we had 30 caliber, we had Tommy rods, we had we were a rat patrol in Germany. We picked up gun after gun. So you never know when you're going to need it and when you would have to. We did it. But then we went to Lucky Strike. They took all that equipment away. We went right back to the basic. Our mortars, either our pistols or an M1 or the carbine was our main weapon. We would get on board ship and head on out through the Pacific. Got as far as, I think it was Lahore. And the war ended over there. So we got the job of going back to Boston. We come back to Boston. In Boston, we went into Camp Fort Dix, and I got a 45-day furlough, and went back, and he said, "You're not going to the South Pacific." I said, "How thankful I am about that." I go down into my.
What are your main impressions of, biggest impressions of your wartime experience? What were your main impressions? What's your biggest impression of your experience?
Damn glad I'm home, and I'm damn glad I'm alive. Here's some dead persons.
This is a concentration camp?
That's a concentration camp. This is going across the Rhine River.
How long were you at Metz?
About 30 days. Here's a GI mortar crew.
What was the purpose of the white phosphorus?
Smoke screen and burnable. Burn anything that could come. There's another. There is the picture of the 4.2 chemical mortar.
So was your experience worth it?
Yes. Why? It was worth it because I was alive. I had to retrain some more of the young kids. Lost quite a few of them. And retrain some of them.
What did you think of the replacement system?
Not very good, because we get some of them that come in, I'll use the expression, they didn't know their ass from their elbow. Had kids come in, put them on guard duty, and they go to sleep at night. I was the kind of guy that was on my feet most of the time. I could tell you something peculiar. My younger brother was with the 7th Army, come in at Marseille. He was with the 12th Armored Division. We were outside of Metz. And he came all the way up. He went AWOL. Came all the way up from Marseille into Metz. We were in the cellar, laying out fire control for the next moment. Matter of fact, at midnight, because they were trying to assault the fort. It ended up, he came in, I didn't even know him. He was so dirty, needed a shave, needed a clean uniform, and everything else. And this sergeant said to me, "Sergeant, yeah, and here's a guy, he says he knows you." I looked up, I don't know him. And he turned and he said, "What the hell, you don't even know your own brother?" I said, take him out, get him cleaned up, bring him back. He was brought back. Cleaned up. I got 5 minutes. Got cleaned up, had supper and that with it. That night he fired a mortar. We showed him how to fire it onto German soil. But it ended up that he had to go back. And I went back with Colonel's eagles in my pocket here. And even though I had sergeant stripes on, I went back as the colonel. And we went back to Paris, from Paris all the way back down and almost to Marseille to go to it. And he was not to go into the jug. He was to go company punishment. He said he dug so damn many slip trenches. Could have dug it to Berlin, he said. But he... And this captain of his outfit started a rant and rage and everything else about me being back there and everything else. Had to find out the password all the way from the 3rd Army to back to Paris, which was headquarters, from headquarters all the way down here, get the password from the 7th Army in order to get it right into him. And this captain was giving me I reached there and I said, sir, I just happen to have these two. And I said, they were given to me in order to make sure this man gets back to his outfit. And you don't send him to jail. Because if you do, we'll come down, we'll annihilate the 12th Division. Put him back in my pocket. And he said he never heard of a sergeant wear Colonel's eagles in his pocket because they were given to me because of the fact I had to go that way. That's all there was to it.
Thank you very much, sir. It's been a pleasure. Some very good material here. You're the first mortarman we've had.
Everything else. And we went down to, what was it, Fort Campbell, honey? That's where we went, where Todd was. All right, we went there, and we went down into the armored division and everything else, and he was showing. And I walked in, and here's a chemical mortar already set up. And this young guy was there, he was going to tell me all about it. And I told him, I said, I was firing this thing when you were in your mother's arms. And went on, and I told him what it do, and what it would do, and everything else. And we busted many a base plate firing so fast and so furious and everything else because of the explosion on the end of it.